So it's year 3 for you now, right? Year 3. Um, I guess what's your overview of the first couple years you've been here so far?
It's been a different different 3 years for me, 2 years, just from a standpoint of how, the process of building and rebuilding has come. But I feel like this year is kind of like my and our year one, just from a mindset standpoint, a player mindset standpoint, staff mindset. I think we all just feel very, very refreshed, and we're getting back to our old selves.
So how do you feel about where you are at this point? Because you're not probably not in terms of where you want to be in terms of the
Yeah.
winning, especially after the experience that you had at Gardner Webb and at Tennessee as a player. I mean, you're used to winning. I think we can say that. So how are you? What's it been like? Not exact. With it not exactly going that way at first.
Yeah, I'm used to winning, but I'm also used to the mindset of winning being around me and across the board. And I think that's what we have now. I think everybody has the mindset and the mentality. Even pedigree. I think we put a lot of emphasis on pedigree and where people come from. But I think that still comes second to just a mentality and a mindset and an approach.
Yeah. So you got 2 returners from last year. They're both here today, and it seems like they're both somewhat scorned by what happened last year because you guys certainly had a good amount of talent with a 20-point per game score and an all Big Ten guard. I mean, when you have that kind of arsenal, you'd think, especially in the American, hey, perhaps you can find some success there, but then injuries come along the way and other issues, especially on the defensive end with it, not getting it done. So what kind of failures do you think did you assess from last year that you think you were perhaps able to rectify in the summer this year?
Yeah, I think we were very good individual players last year. From an offensive standpoint, especially. But I think where we kind of we dropped the ball just from an evaluation standpoint is mindset, and then obviously on the defensive end, just the simple want to and push to play defense. And then I think we rely too much on these players are experienced, these players are seniors. How do they not know these things? I think we relied on that too much, where this year we've kind of gone into it where they don't know anything. Basic defensive schemes. We've just really, really went ground level with them starting in the summer. And I think that's why, maybe system and putting things in, we're not ahead compared to last year. But I think from an IQ standpoint, we're definitely way ahead than where we were last year.
So did you deliberately go after players that didn't have as high of a pedigree that you can perhaps mold into your own and, they can become a star here where they weren't a star at other places?
Yeah, we intentionally went after players who had a really, really, really good winning mentality. But more importantly, those players, they may not have played elite minutes, but they played quality minutes from where they were coming from. And I think that's more important than anything because most of the time those players are driven to have whatever their next looks like, it's going to be better than what their last was. And so I think that was the intentional part.
You are in more of a transactional era with the portal.
Yeah.
You're not spending months and months and months recruiting players like you used to. So how do you evaluate a winning mentality when you're recruiting these players in such a short amount of time?
In our business, everybody says don't burn your bridges. And I think that's where me and my staff do a really good job because a lot of the players that are on our team now, we recruited in the past at some point or we were familiar with them, at some point. And so I think that was huge for us because we were able to bring in players that we were already kind of familiar with, where they came from, what they wanted to do with their lives and things like that. It is very transactional, but I don't think it has to be that way, especially when you're bringing in players who don't think that way. One of the first questions recruiting I asked is, I need players here who want to come here and play for Coach Alex and for no other reason. You ask some intentional questions and you'll figure out, what that player is about, and that's what we did.
obviously you're not from Memphis, but you are from the Tennessee area, so
Yeah.
I'm sure you've heard things throughout your whole life about how Memphis is a basketball mecca. It is a basketball city, and obviously that's more centered around at least from a legacy historical standpoint, the men's basketball team here and the Grizzlies and that kind of thing. But is there perhaps an extra pressure to win and be successful here because this is supposed to be a basketball town and you're coaching a basketball team with a vast amount of resources. Is there a single this is Memphis, this is a basketball school, we should be able to get it done?
Yeah, I don't know if it's pressure. I wouldn't call it pressure, but I do think that that's what our players deserve. And I think our staff has put in numerous amounts of hours in, developing and spending time with our players. I think we have put a lot of hours in getting into the city, giving our time. And I think we deserve to have that support as well. I think the winning is coming. That stems from me, but that doesn't have anything to do with them and what they're doing for the city.
What is it about this group that convinces you that the winning is coming there?
They wanted to come to Memphis. There's not, in our business, on our side, on the women's side, it's hard to convince players sometimes to come to Memphis, but every one of them, I'm not sure it took very many calls for them to say yes. And I believe of our players, only 2 of them, didn't almost immediately say, hey, I want to commit to Memphis. And I think that's what it's all about. When you're where you want to be, your mindset tends to be a little bit different. When you're around who you want to be around, your mindset is much, much different.
Why is it harder to convince players on the women's side to come here? Is it just because of the program, or is it external factors?
It may be external factors, but I also think that there's a lot of unknowns. But it takes you coming on campus. It takes you getting into our gym to actually see, like, wow, we've had numerous recruits come and say, well, I'm actually surprised that I really, really like it here, and you all have made my decision that much harder. But I think it takes, for people to put eyes on us in person to see, what we're all about. That's why it's so important with fans. Like, come see us in person. Don't watch us on ESPN Plus, ESPNU. You got to come feel the environment in person, which will make them want to come back.
I know you mentioned earlier that the transactional NIL portal method is not exactly, your favorite, but
Yeah.
you are, well equipped to be able to do it here. Ed was talking about the revenue sharing, division or whatever earlier this summer, and obviously football and men's basketball are the top 2 by a pretty decent margin, but you guys are 3rd there, and I think that's pretty significant. We're an SEC country. Where baseball is a big deal. A lot of schools. Women's soccer here is extremely successful. So, what do you think it says that your program does have that kind of investment here and that kind of care?
Well, I think it just speaks to the leadership. You always want somebody leading you who you want to follow. I tell my players that we need great leaders, but we also need great followers. And when you want to follow your leader, I think that's important, and I think that's the mentality that Dr. Scott has put into our program in particular. We actually use this for our program, but one of the things he did in one of the first meetings that he had, he talked about start, stop, and continue. So every day in practice, we say offensively and defensively, what do we want to start, stop, and continue? Because I think it streamlines everything. And then when you talk about revenue sharing, I think where most people focus that on the transfer portal, it was important for us to be intentional about this class because we do have a team that can majority return with only 2 seniors. And so where some people's revenue share may go into their portal recruiting, ours will go into recruiting our players back to our team.
Yeah. Well, there is, especially in this era, a difference between can return and will return. So how much was that a factor for you this past offseason? How many, considering, the way last year went, was there perhaps a choice in not having as many players return as there maybe could have been?
There was definitely I made the decision to shorten our roster. I think that was important for many reasons, revenue share, Obviously, the less people, the more money you can distribute. Numbers wise, you can't play everybody. And I didn't want to continue to have transfers every year because somebody's not playing and unhappy. But I think that's our job to make sure that these players stay, because we actually want them to stay after this year. That's not always the case every year, and that wasn't the case last year.
So, in an offseason full of change, why was it so important to have Bailey and Tamaya come back?
Well, I think their approach to the game, their approach to life is just different. Their backgrounds, how they were raised, is just different, and I can relate to it. Tamaya being an all-conference player, I mean, just her buy-in to it was hard, and she probably didn't sometimes understand, why it was so hard on her. She may not have understood the process, but at the end of the day, she trusted in it. And then at the end of the year, she had success. So for her to return as an all-conference player, that's huge, because she could have probably easily went anywhere in the country. Bailey, she went from her playing time was kind of inconsistent throughout the year. We have injuries to two post players. Now all of a sudden she's playing a lot of minutes. And as a freshman, she also has to produce. But again, I think both of them see the vision, and they see the direction we're going in. They're probably the only two that, I didn't have that initial conversation of, just for some perspective, I went into our individual meetings last year, and the first question I wanted them to answer is, are you staying or are you leaving? Because if you're leaving, then we don't need to have a further discussion. It's just a part of the business. I don't think anybody should have any hard feelings. A lot of players didn't come here to play for me in the first place. So going about it that way also let me know who wanted to be in this program and who wanted to play for me.
So that was the first question in exit meet,
yep.
Very first, right at the top.
Yep.
So literally, if they said they're leaving, it's over right there. That's just the end of the meeting.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing. If you're already in that mindset, I think we had so much one foot in, one foot out. When things are going good, you're positive, but when things are going bad, I'm leaving. And so I just felt like that was the best approach to go at it. But also, there wasn't any hard feelings, there wasn't any sensitivities on. Now I can't speak to everybody else, but not on my end, because it's just, again, it's a part of the business. It is what it is. Everybody that went, I don't know how many players went to other places, but I was happy for them, because they need to go somewhere where they're going to be happy and get the success that they want to have. And I don't have bad relationship with players. At the end of the day, they're young women. So I think that's the best way to go about it.
You've mentioned a lack of buy-in several times, pertaining to, maybe some players from last year's roster. How challenging was it to perhaps coach and navigate through that, try to force it out of people when it ultimately didn't manifest itself there?
Well, I think every coach in the country has said this. They're not going to coach effort. They're not going to coach, at sometimes, just going through the motions and things like that. That's hard to coach, because you start to question your system. You start to question, even though you've had success in it for years. Last year's team was the first team that I've had that hasn't been ranked in a national defensive stat in the top 10, at least 15. And so I think just because of that, I can't continue to question something that I know has worked. But probably, if we're being honest, we're probably less talented players.
So did you find yourself, questioning yourself at all at any point?
Well, I think when things aren't working, you have to make adjustments. You can't continue to do the same thing. I can't continue to beg people to do the same things over and over and over. Either we're going to have to change it or, you're going to have to start buying into what we're doing. So
in terms of the rest of the roster besides your two returners, you're not bringing in as big of names last year. So for those unfamiliar, who is standing out for you so far?
You know what? I'll just say everybody's standing out. In my opinion, we did bring in some big names. Maybe you or anybody else doesn't know them, but we knew them because we were very strategic in who we went after.
So I guess just what's the message to the rest of the American and Memphis fans or anyone from moving forward then?
I don't know if I can say the message that we have on our team, but I think to round it out, put it in a big nutshell, you probably don't know what this stands for, but it's SOTS, and I'll just leave it at that.
I'm sure I'll figure it out.
You'll figure it out, I'm sure. Yeah.
Thank you, Alex.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah.